Hey, folks, I'm John Kraska, Executive Director for EveryLibrary and the EveryLibrary Institute. It is Wednesday night, the 25th of September. Almost sounds like a song, doesn't it? I'm very happy to be here tonight with Paula Poundstone, a comedian and a longtime library advocate and supporter. We're doing Every Library Live here, Paula, as you know, to talk about a couple big things. We're trying to do a conversation about censorship because it's banned Books Week, and if we didn't, the calendar, we'd have to flip it to the next week. We're trying to do a big conversation about reading, the joy of reading, libraries, and the role of libraries in people's lives. Having you here tonight is really important because you have been one of the strongest public advocates for libraries out there in the world. Every Library is a political action committee for libraries, everybody. We work on everything from election days to censorship and discrimination. And we're trying to have this conversation with the American public in order to reset the conversation, not just the bad headlines, but bring in some good ones. So, Paula, I'm looking forward to this chat tonight. I appreciate your time. I do want to read the official bio, though, if that's okay.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, your publicist would murder me otherwise. So,
Oh, yeah.
Paula Poundstone, legendary comedian, author, and podcast host, known for her sharp wit, engaging storytelling, and unforgettable live performances. Whether she's headlining theaters, hosting the hit podcast Nobody Listens to Paula Poundstone, which, by the way, that title cracks me up every time I say it out loud, or is a regular panelist on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. And by the way, being a white guy from the suburbs, I know your voice more than I should because of Wait, Wait. Your brilliance and your humor, it's unparalleled. Your book, The Totally Unscientific Study of the Search for Human Happiness, has been celebrated for its wit and charm. And your audiobook was a finalist for the Audiobook of the Year, which is pretty cool. But like I said before, you've been a spokesperson for the American Library Association's United for Libraries division, talking about libraries. You got a quote that I want to start with. You said in one interview a couple of years back, you've been in the trenches for libraries since the Patriot Act days, back 20 years ago. You said, it's funny that we think of libraries as quiet, demure places where we are shushed by dusty, bun-balancing, bespectacled women. The truth is, libraries are a raucous clubhouse of free speech, controversy, and community. Librarians have stood up to the Patriot Act, sat down with noisy toddlers, and reached out to illiterate adults. Libraries can never be shushed. Paula, what's your problem with buns and bespectacles?
It was the old days. That is what you imagine, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a good day when I came up with that description, because every time I hear or read that description, I'm like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
that's exactly it. And that was around the time of the Patriot Act, and libraries were on the front lines.
Yeah. Well, it takes a certain courage to say that a law is illegal, that a law is unjust and unconstitutional. I mean, you got to show up for the people who are fighting for the rights.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, those librarians are so damn smart. Are they smart or are they vessels? I can't. I'm not sure. Are they smart or they just know where all the knowledge is?
That's a very good question.
Smart and knowledgeable, two different things entirely. I'm not smart enough nor knowledgeable enough to know for sure.
What if it's 250,000 people around the United States of America who just have photographic memories, so that they don't actually retain anything, internally? It's just all right here like an index card.
Well, I think, isn't the sort of history of libraries, or the purpose of libraries to some degree, was there used to be a comic in San Francisco who said this. He's since deceased, but his name was Warren Spotswood. And he used to do this thing about, he would say, when there was too much knowledge to keep in our heads, we put it in books.
Okay.
And when there were too many books, we put them in libraries. And I don't really know if that's how it came about, but it kind of is that way. It's sort of like how you don't know anybody's phone number anymore, because it's in your phone.
Absolutely.
And you figure, if it's in the library, well, I don't really have to keep it in my head, do I? Not that I have that much space in my head, although I know a lot of really useless stuff. I don't know the big. There's some large gaps in my body of knowledge. For example, my knowledge of history, big gaps. And then what's really frustrating, as a person who would like to know more about history but doesn't, is that it often turns out that what we learned in school wasn't true.
Well, I feel offended sometimes that we spent that kind of money, tax money on public schools, and then private tuition money on stuff that turns out to be anecdotal.
Yeah, kindergarten, part of kindergarten curriculum. I don't know if it still is, but it was when my kids were in school. Part of kindergarten curriculum is the Thanksgiving story, and the Thanksgiving story is made up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't even think, I forget where I heard this. It might have been NPR a long time ago. I don't even think turkeys were like a food that people ate back then.
Well, I mean, look at them. Who'd even go after that?
Yeah. Well, plus they're so nice. Turkeys are really nice. I've been to a friendly farm before, and I spent some time petting a turkey. And, when I was growing up, we had a neighbor that was a really good, she was good at sort of crafts, but she was a really good sewer. She could make all sorts of things. And so she had like a sewing kit. Women used to have sewing kits. And it was always in some sort of decorated baskety thing. And then, I don't know, Mother's Day would come up, or a birthday or Christmas, and they would be gifted another sewing kitty, baskety kind of a thing. And she had this basket at one point that was a bird. I don't know if it was a swan or a turkey, but it was a big bird, and it was a basket, but it had cloth on it as well. And you raised up the wing, and underneath the wing was the hole where you entered the basket. And that's what petting a turkey is like, except for you don't find notions in there.
I love it.
They have a vast space between their wing and their body that is excellent for petting, and I imagine storage.
Yeah, it's practical and alluring. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I'll bet you go into any library and they know that already.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Hey, you're talking about your knowledge of history. Your podcast, your hit podcast, again, cracks me up every single time I say it out loud. Nobody listens to Paula Poundstone. You've got 2 segments on there with Adam that I think are very brilliant. You mentioned the history one when in the green room when we're talking. The other one though is your book club. So I've been in exactly one book club my entire life. I'm not a librarian myself. I run a political action committee for libraries. And the book club I was in was when my kids were really little. It was the Dads in the Neighborhood Book Club. And
wow.
There were 2 rules. One was we met at the tavern, for our book club discussions. And the second was you didn't have to read the book. In fact, the third rule was we didn't even bother talking about the book. We'd occasionally have other dads come through who'd show up having read the book, and they were disappointed that we had no interest in talking about the book. So, and I love the segment about when you all do you assign reading. Tell me about the culture of reading on your podcast.
Well, what you described, your podcast, with the exception of the tavern, your book club, with the exception of the tavern, is not unlike our book club. Yeah. When I first came up with the idea to do a book club, my manager, Bonnie Burns, who's also a voice on the podcast, she right away looked up, how do you do a book club? What are the tips for doing a book club? And I had chosen as our first book, Moby Dick.
Oh yeah, that's a light breezy read. Yeah.
So Bonnie, we had a production meeting, and Bonnie says, "Well, the best, you're not supposed to choose books that are more than like 200 pages." And I'm like, okay, but that's part of the funny part. Yeah. Part of the funny part is that this ridiculous group of podcasters are doing I don't know how many pages is 400 or something pages. It just went on forever. And by the way, I happened to be talking to my high school English teacher right around the time when we were doing the first book club and we were reading Moby Dick. And I want to just admit openly, freely, if you will, that although I have a copy of the book, I listened. Now, I listened to an unabridged version, But walking the dog while I listen that's helpful.
That's more than a 5K worth of listen, though. That's a long book. Goodness gracious.
Well, oh yeah, I walked. Well, I live in Santa Monica, and I walked to St. Louis. So it was, it was a long book. Okay. So I was talking to my high school English teacher one day, and we've been friends since I was in high school, and she's much smarter than me and much more well-read than me, and I try to sort of pretend when I talk to her. Excuse me, I have a chronic cough. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, we're reading Moby Dick. And she said this thing that I've heard before, but she said it like really sort of clinging to this idea. She said, well, it's not really about a man and a whale. And she was like, oh, it's much deeper than that. It's much, I forget. Sorry, dog problems. I forget what her explanation was, but it was like way over my head. And I said, oh yeah. I said, yeah, I've heard that. And the truth is, for me, it was about a man and a whale. Hold on, Mo, come. Speaking of whales.
Yeah.
I got a big dog who's very excited to be a part of this event.
It's fantastic. We're glad to, and also just for folks who are watching at home today, we've got a Lucy and Desi behind you there too, just to explain what they're seeing in little glimpses. So
I also have 10 cats, so they're likely to show up at one time or another. Mo, come here. Stop. You're a really badly behaved dog.
So the idea of reading the book or not reading the book, interacting with each other over the ideas, though. I mean, I love
exactly.
It makes for a great fit.
What's funny is a lot. I don't know if we really ever anticipated that the listeners would read along. I don't think we did. It wasn't an outrageous idea, but I don't think any of us really thought that they would. But a lot of listeners, because we occasionally do like mailbag and we'll read, usually it's people's complaints. And a lot of listeners would get upset if one of them hadn't been doing the reading. In fact, it sort of peaked, I think, when we did Catcher in the Rye, because I used to do this thing where every time we came on to do the book club, I would pretend that I had inadvertently read the wrong thing.
Oh, that's great.
For example, Bob Uecker, the sports announcer, wrote, I believe it was autobiography, I believe, that was also called Catcher in the Rye. And so, I came on and pretended that I had read that inadvertently instead of reading, the J.D. Salinger one. And people were just irked with me. They were just, what's the matter with you?
I love it. So Paula, so with the podcast, the creativity that goes into that, the stand up and the comedy work that you do, the creativity that goes into that. You're also an author. This is a literary festival this week, so I got to ask you a book question. Talk to me about your process as an author across books, across your stand up material, across your podcast. I mean, are these the same processes, or do you find yourself in different brain spaces when you write?
It's slightly different, but not enormously different. I know that Ray Bradbury used to say in interviews that you have to write every day. And I would be an enormous disappointment to Ray Bradbury. And nor am I on the level of Ray Bradbury. And maybe that's because I don't write every day. When I was doing the majority, like when I was writing the totally unscientific study of the search for human happiness, I still had kids at home. And then I wrote a book before that called There's Nothing in This Book That I Meant to Say.
Yeah.
And then I also wrote 3 math workbooks where I wrote stories for them with my high school math teacher. And all those I did when I still had kids at home. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have a tremendous amount of free time. So, if I happen to squirrel away some free time, it didn't necessarily mean that I was, feeling what there's a psychological term for that that I had flow at that moment. And so there were some times where just, I would finally have time to write and just have zero ideas. But one of the things that I do is, and this sometimes causes a little problem at the TSA, I carry this small pen
Okay.
on a little hook clipped to my belt buckle.
Yeah.
And when I have a thought, I also carry in my back pocket wads of paper.
I love that you have that on you right this minute.
I always have it.
Yeah.
And one of the things I put in my jacket pocket just before I fly, I put also paper and pens in my jacket. Even though I still have the one, I put another, because sometimes it depends what paper I'm writing on. Like some paper seems to receive my thoughts better than others. It's because the hardest thing of the whole thing is having an idea to begin with. Once I have the idea, the rest of it is just secretarial work. The rest of it is just sort of transcribing. But the part where you get the idea, that, I think that takes some synapses firing, and I'm not always sure how to get them to do that. I find that when I'm walking, it helps. But if I'm too deliberate about it, then the ideas hide from me, I think.
That's really interesting.
But that is the same for stand-up, for writing books, and for writing anything for my podcast. In fact, one of the things my manager always does that I find irksome, and hold on, let me get the list. But one of the things she always does, she'll say, one of the things we do on the podcast is I'll have a character call my partner Adam on the podcast, and so, but I have to have an idea in order to do that. But Bonnie will say, okay, you know what I think would be good this week? Why don't you do a phone call? And I'm like, well, that sounds fantastic to me. If you have an idea, right? It has to, have to. Otherwise, which is why I would make a terrible writer for a television show, because the idea that you have to churn stuff out on a regular basis. A woman I knew years ago that was a stand-up comic, I bumped into her in New York one time. And since I had seen her years and years ago, she had come to all sorts of success in her career. And she told me the funniest damn thing. She said that she had spent years writing for, some late night talk shows. I don't know which one. But she said, she ended up getting rehired. She thought that was behind her, but she got rehired. And, now she, made a harder bargain. And they said to her, because this was just for the monologue, and they have teams of people. They have, 10, 20 people writing their monologue. She said they told her she had to write 75 jokes a day.
Wow. And
she said to them, guess what? I'm not going to write 75 jokes a day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no wonder that Milton Berle would have paid you $5 to send in one. That's a tremendous amount of need. So.
Well, it is. If you're doing, a nightly thing that has to be different every time. I mean, one of the great things about traveling around the country as a stand-up comic is my shows are different every night, but they're not 100% different every night. Yeah. And so if you saw me in Kansas City one night and then you saw me in, Oxnard, California the next night, there might be, I don't know, maybe even 70% that was the same. Mm-hmm. Maybe. Mm-hmm. It depends. But, if I was in the same place night after night, I would feel like, I have to make it different every night.
Oh, I understand that feeling. I listen to your podcast. There's a few other podcasts out there I listen to. One of them is Mark Maron's, and the WTF by Mark Maron, and he's the comedian's comedian. He interviewing other comedians, and I've actually learned quite a bit from listening to comedians when I'm doing the work I do as a library advocate and a trainer. And I'm not blowing smoke here. Mark and his guests over the years have talked about how I got to get up in front of an audience of librarians, and you've been in front of audiences of librarians. You know what it's like, and I got to talk to them about big ideas. Like advocacy and activism and political stuff and white papers about policy. And I feel like I got my 5-minute routine, my 20-minute routine, and my hour HBO special ready to go anytime, Paula, about library stuff.
Absolutely. The great, we had as a guest on our podcast one time, the great former Solicitor General, Neil Katyal.
Okay.
And Neil told me that he years ago took improv classes.
Yeah.
And I know he's kind of fascinated by comedy. I can just tell from things that I've heard him say. But it's actually a helpful, it's not bad for all sorts of professions to have some, I guess it's like, what was that thing that people would belong to years ago? The Toastmasters.
Toastmasters, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. There's something helpful. I think it's why when you're a kid and you did a report, they'd want you to do a written report and an oral report because there are skills there. When I was in the 7th grade in Mrs. Boatman's class, we were doing the elements chart. And we were each supposed to take an element and do a report on it. And I chose tin. And the problem with tin is we really don't have much tin anymore. So all of my visual aids, I would say, like I had like a poster board with like a can taped to it. And I'd go, well, this is not actually tin. This is aluminum.
Yeah.
And it would make, the class thought that was so funny. So at the end of my report, Mrs. Boatman, who was never private about your grades, she said, well, if I was giving you a grade based on entertainment, I'd give you an A. But as a science report, I'm giving you a C. That's when I knew, go for entertainment. Forget about science. It's not going to work out for me.
I love it. Okay, so this is a literary festival. So we had our culture reading conversation, which check the box on that. But it's a library festival too. I want to come back to this early childhood period here. Your 7th grade, your own biography here. One of your other quotes that I dug up on the internet says, libraries are my life. I go to the library at least 3 times a week. I never return anything on time, but the library's provided me with everything that I love. Paula, that's a really high bar to hit.
Oh,
and I did verify it too. It wasn't just ChatGPT making it up. I actually looked that one up. It's from
there you
2017.
Go. Yeah. Well, especially when I was writing, it's very easy for me to stumble into a subject while I'm writing that I know almost nothing about. I think because it's a pretty narrow roadway of what I do know. And so I was forever going back and forth to the library. And actually, when I wrote, There's Nothing in This Book That I Meant to Say, which was a series of biographies of towering historic figures. And in the telling of their story, I told my own. So I would jump off. I think one of my favorite things, I guess I was talking about, I was writing about Beethoven. And I said something about one of his operas. And then I said, I can't remember what it was any longer, but then I said, Oprah wanted me to be on her show one time because I would let whatever I was telling people about the subject, I would let it sort of remind me of something about my own life. And
you got your opera, you got your Oprah. You might as well name drop that though. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I didn't go on Oprah. She didn't want me on for a flattering reason. But wait, there's a point to this. I knew nothing about Beethoven. I knew, at one time when I was writing one of the math books, I wrote a story about a bull in a china shop. And it required me having information about China. All sorts of China. I know nothing about China. I still have plastic Winnie the Pooh dishes from when my kids were little, there was no point getting rid of them. They still held food.
Mhm.
So I found myself going to the library a lot.
Mhm. So
Um,
what attracted I mean, so there's the hero story potentially around the Patriot Act stuff that we started, talking about a few minutes ago. But really, why did you put your own good name? Any activist has the opportunity to put their money, their time, or their good name into something. And your good name, as a spokesperson, why'd you want to show up for libraries like that?
I think this is terrible because I'm not going to be able to remember her last name. The woman that used to be the head of Friends of the Library.
Yeah, friends. Yeah. I'm
Sally.
trying to blank. Sally Reed. Yes.
Yes. Um, she asked, I don't know, must have been working in a town near where she lived. I think it was near DC, maybe.
She's Philly at
She
the
asked,
time, I think. Yeah.
maybe it was. She asked if she could meet with me,
Mhm.
and we went out for, a beverage, maybe some French fries, and she asked me. It was just that simple, and it was. You're right. There are, literally thousands, perhaps even millions of causes to support, all legitimate, all good. And this was an easy one to say yes to.
Yeah,
Um,
it caught your imagination, at least. I'm glad about that.
I can't remember what the order of events was here. I can't remember. I think this was before Sally asked me that. I think. I used to go to the library a lot with my kids. In fact, at one point, this was when audiobooks were really just sort of coming into being. Um, uh, the main library was closed down while they were making improvements on it or something, and they farmed all the children's book stuff out to different branches. And there was one branch in particular that had the bulk of the children's stuff, and so we used to go there all the time. And they had all the audiobooks. And because my kids did gymnastics, and one of my daughters had to have physical therapy, and we were on Wednesday afternoons. I had to drive 50 miles every day,
Mhm.
every Wednesday, and so we listened to a lot of audiobooks. At one point, we'd listen. They didn't have any more for us.
Wow.
Now, again, this is when they first sort of came into being, and libraries were first getting them. And
Mhm.
so it wouldn't have been as big a collection as they would have now.
Mhm.
But anyway, so we went to the library a lot. And one day we were at this branch, and it was very sort of crowded with furniture and tables and stuff, because they had taken some of the stuff from the main library and put it there while they did these improvements. And my oldest daughter, who might have been in like the junior high at that point or something, or middle school, and we were, up in the main area of the library. And as I say, it was very crowded, and not with people really, but with tables and chairs and stuff. And there was a woman, we realized, teaching another woman, two adults.
Mhm.
One woman was teaching the other woman to read.
Mm.
Now, since that time, they built a whole nother main library. And in the new main library, there are homework rooms that you sign up for. I mean, you don't pay for them, but you sign up, you schedule time where you're going to have.
Right.
My guess is that if they're still doing that, that literacy program, then they're probably using those rooms. They wouldn't be out where, and my daughter and I tried really hard not to stare. And so we sort of finished up what we were doing, and we moved away, and eventually we walked out to the car.
Mhm.
And I'm telling you, I had goosebumps.
Yeah.
And I said to her, a lot of times when you donate your time or you donate your money, you kind of wonder, am I really doing any good?
Mhm.
Is this, who knows how this gets distributed? I said, let me tell you something. The woman who volunteered to teach that woman to read knows for certain that what she's doing
Yep.
will have a ripple effect for generations.
Oh my God, absolutely. And that story about libraries as a place where things like that happen, the human, well, so like, I'm not much of a reader myself. Okay, I'm not. My wife's got a pile of books. It's going to fall over one night from her bedside and kill us both. Okay, like, and she's actually a literacy volunteer at the library right now, so it
Oh,
still
that's
goes
so
on,
great.
Paula. But
Yeah,
for
so
me,
great.
the librarians have always been a proxy for my compassion. They do stuff that I think needs to get done in the world, and that I'm not going to do myself. You know, and I don't have the talent. I don't have the patience. I don't like children very much. So like it's. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's my one. It's my one-liner for my 20-minute set. The and seriously, like the fact that that motivated you too. That's why I showed up for libraries as well. That really warms my heart.
Well, it's an extraordinary thing. I mean, and again, there are lots and lots of ways to give, and probably lots of them are in fact effective and successful.
Yeah.
But there was something about that, and I made note of saying this to my daughter: the courage of the woman who had to go in and say, "Hey, I don't know how to read."
Yeah.
And
Oh
this
my
is
gosh.
something
Yeah.
that
Absolutely.
the combination of the two is just gives me goosebumps. I too, by the way, am not. I'm not a great reader because I read so damn slow, and
Okay.
because I'm so often tired.
That's
So what happens is, like, I can't. I don't usually read in the middle of the day because because I'm going to fall asleep in the middle of the day.
yeah.
Because
Yeah. You're getting nothing
it'll
done.
sort of slow me down to such a degree
Yeah.
that I fall asleep and screw up the whole day.
Yeah.
Um, but I often do read at night or on an airplane.
Hmm.
The problem is I read so slow, and then I fall asleep reading, and the book will hit me in the head or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah. Chip
and
or two.
then I'm not proud of this, but I do dog ear pages, and I set the book aside, and now the next night that I'm reading, I take it out and I look at it and I realize I was really kind of asleep when I
Yeah.
read the last couple of pages, so now I have to back up.
Hmm.
So eventually I return to the first page of the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
It's just yeah. Yeah. That was a great book. What did it? I don't remember.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I am really, I mean, a good audiobook, and there are many. um, they're so brilliantly read.
Hmm.
I mean, I kind of like the idea of having my own spin on how I interpret the words in front, as opposed to another reader or an actor or actress. At the same time, I'm willing to make that trade off because I can listen to a lot of stuff, and I mostly read nonfiction,
Hmm.
which that's it makes you fall asleep.
Oh, I'm
Uh,
I'm working on a book right now about the history of the petition clause in the First Amendment because
Whoa! I
I
can't believe
know,
you're
right?
doing this now with me. That's a page turner.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. I mean, because well, right now everything I'm segueing. Watch,
Okay.
everything going on with libraries right now about censorship is it's First Amendment issues. The
Yeah.
First Amendment, freedom of speech comes right up against this right to petition. The idea that somebody can say, "I want to ban this book. I have a redress of grievances." So I'm trying to figure that out. I'm trying to work it through as a civilian. I don't have a JD. I'm not a lawyer.
Oh,
Um,
that's great. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because there is tension between those two things for sure. At one point, I was writing something, I forget, an article or something, uh, about the book banning, or
mhm,
maybe I was writing, yeah, I think it was like a short article with jokes. And I realized, like, I didn't really know specifically what books were banned. I mean, I knew some stuff. I knew like Toni Morrison. I knew anything that referred to, um, you know, sexual orientation or whatever kind of
yeah,
thing was being taken. So I had, but I was like, well, let me get some specific titles. Now, I'm not an expert on this topic. I so Google it on the computer. I found. All right, hold on. My dog's whining. I'm gonna wait. Okay, she's stopping. So I Google. I looked at only one site. It's important that I say that because maybe there, I again not an expert, and I'm using only one resource here. But it was a site that told books that were taken off the shelf, and then it told what was the offensive, right? What the offense of the book was. And one of the books was Charlotte's Web.
How dare they?
And do you know why? Because what the offense was? Do you know why they wanted Charlotte's Web off the shelf?
I don't know. I don't, honestly.
Because God didn't make animals talk.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I always say to people, I go, well, I recall there was a bush that was a bit chatty there for a while. It's just so mind-blowingly stupid. And the thing is, what's weird about the period of time we're in with the book banning stuff, or maybe we're coming out of it, I'm not certain.
I don't know.
But what's weird about it is, the Moms for Liberty were a very small group. And apparently what they were good at was the internet, getting, the angry guys that live in their mom's basement to go to the school board meetings and pound on podiums. Sometimes they didn't even have kids in that school. They were just, I don't know, they just liked the idea of scaring people or whatever I don't know what their motivation was. I guess I shouldn't speak to that, but they were scaring people. And that's frustrating to me that this minority of people were able to get places to take books off shelves.
Oh, absolutely. So we did some big polling this time last year with Book Riot, the magazine, the book review, reading lifestyle magazine, and we asked a couple thousand parents, because this Moms for Liberty says that they're for moms. We want to ask parents directly, what do you think about book bans? 8% of parents in our survey, big number of people we questioned, 8% said book bans are a great way to keep kids safe. Everybody else is like, stay out of my bookshelf. Don't tell me how to parent my kid. And why are we hurting these kids? Why are we coming after these kids based on who they are? Because the books are a real proxy fight. When you talk about librarians as a proxy for your compassion or your hope in society, books are a proxy for going after people. And it's so easy to go after a book. It's hard to go after individuals. Absolutely.
Well, the other thing, sometimes these organizations, I remember on NPR, I think I heard this, I heard an interview with the guy who I believe had written an article for The Atlantic about this issue. And he had interviewed Moms for Liberty. And I think it was there where I heard some say, that they were very sincere, which is a little hard to believe after the three-way story, but that they were very sincere. And one of them says that she believed that God told her to do this. And I would just love to have a chance to talk to that woman, because I would love to say to her, is it possible, ma'am, that God told me to tell you to cut it out?
Well,
maybe.
I mean, it's Paula's letter to the Floridians.
Poor Florida, huh?
Yeah. I'll tell you what I've had a couple of decent ideas in my life. I'm in my early middle ages, mind you. And one of the good ideas was to buy the URL, the website URL, momsforlibraries.org. I bought it out from under him, Paula. And
wow.
I caught the wave, and we've been using it to redirect people to our petitions, to the calls to action that we're doing, because they don't deserve, they don't get the library. They can maybe try and have liberty, and but they don't get the library.
That is so brilliant that you did that. That you really have earned yourself, I would say, several bad ideas where no one can really get on you about it.
Yeah, well,
yes, but Moms for Libraries, I got that.
Yeah. Well, if my wife's watching tonight, because occasionally she'll dial in, when I'm hosting. She's a real sweetheart for that. We're putting it up on the big board, hon. I got several bad ideas. Okay.
Yeah. No. Yeah. You could have that. You could have that sort of tally abacus thing that used to go over like a pool table.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could have that just up over the kitchen sink, maybe.
I love it. Okay, we are over time, and you are a delight to talk to. I could spend the whole night with you. I want to ask you one more final question about libraries, because it's literary, it's culture of reading. We talked about writing, process. Okay, so libraries is where I gotta bring it all home. You said before you hope that we're going to get out of this mess, this censorship mess. I mean, what do Americans need to do to help us get out of this mess, Paula?
Well, probably follow your lead in the research on the friction between the First Amendment and censorship. I just think we shouldn't cave so easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a really good. That's pretty tight. And well, the first quote that I read was really too long for a T-shirt. It was too long for a needlepoint. Like you're not going to put like, but we shouldn't cave so easily. Should actually go up on one of those memes. I'm going to steal that from you tonight, because
I think if you watch the videos of the people that came and pounded the podium and yelled and screamed, they looked nutty, and understandably people were scared of them. And I think it took everyone by surprise. Yeah. I know that libraries have professionals and a process. In a school library or in a public library, there's a process of selecting books. And I think we need to say, hey, we're gonna leave this in terms of for the public, we're gonna leave it to these professionals that we've hired to do this thing. I'm not an expert on everything. And so I often, today I had to go to the eye doctor because I'm not an eye doctor. And so when there's a professional, I like the idea of leaving it to the professional, maybe trying to understand what they're doing for sure, but leaving it to the professional. And I think that's one of the arguments that needs to be made. Like, yeah, there's a process here. And if you want your kid not to read a particular book, fantastic, great. Tell them they can't read it. By the way, see how that goes.
Well, I mean, I'm of the right age to have watched Footloose. We know exactly how that goes.
I thought for sure after Footloose came out that
I know, right?
We're
done with it. Exactly. We've resolved all the issues in the Republic.
Yeah.
Paula, you've been absolutely a delight to talk to you today. Thank you for your longtime advocacy for libraries and for librarians. The storytelling that you do for this sector with Americans, but I'm as touched as I can be about your origin story for library advocacy, about that person teaching the other person how to read. Thanks for sharing that with us tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Yeah, it was.
My dog ate like a ton of tissue paper in this room while I was talking to you.
Well,
I sort of had half an eye on it. The tissue paper is for the kittens to play with, and normally the dog can't get to it. But she knew I was busy. She went right over there and just ate tissue paper.
Yeah, that doggy. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I got to do my closing commercial here. Okay.
Good.
So folks, EveryLibrary Live all week, Wednesday night. We're going through Friday this week for live events. If you're watching this online or an archive, thank you for being here too. The big issues of the day. How do we talk about censorship in a way that is that honest conversation that has us show up, and the great work of libraries around the country. If you are experiencing censorship yourself in your community, in your school district, please come to fightforthefirst.org. We will help you out. And Paula, we haven't talked about this before. We have 110 zip code level campaigns against censorship and discrimination that we're helping to support in public libraries and school libraries around the country. And folks, if you want to take a stand and geographically you're nearby, oh gosh, I think every single state, in the union, you can take action there and try and ameliorate yourself. So again, Paula, what a delight to be with you. Thank you for saying that. And what a delight to be with you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you very much. Take care.